Okay, well, I'd like to introduce you to your co-host for this lesson this evening. First up is Ellie Sparks. She's CCL's Director of Field Development. Next up is me. That's me right there on the screen. My name is Ricky Bradley. I'm one of the CCL IT directors, and I'm also the chapter leader of the Dallas, Texas group. And that's Brett Cease. Brett is CCL's regional coordinator for Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And Brett's going to lead off tonight by telling us about his experience of moving to a new part of the country and how his research really benefited him as he began developing a relationship with his new member of Congress.
Great. Thanks so much, Ricky. Well, like Ricky said, my name is Brett Cease, and I'm actually originally from the north part of Minnesota, but I'm actually currently in North Texas in the Dallas-Denton area pursuing a doctorate actually in public policy. So there's a lot of great alignment with CCL's advocacy with carbon fee and dividend and what I'm studying. And yeah, so I got involved with CCL as a volunteer and group leader up in Bemidji, Minnesota, and then actually when I moved down to North Texas here, I just saw another real opportunity for continued growth in the North Texas area for CCL chapters. And so in, I guess, about a year and a half ago or so, we just started talking about expansion in the Denton area. I think people have probably heard about Denton in national media with its ongoing kind of engagement with fracking and local rights. You know, it's been covered a lot in the news, and there was a lot of overlap with citizens concerned about that and also wanting to take action on kind of CCL's front as well. So one thing that I really wanted to highlight tonight in my story, I guess, is just the importance of doing proper research and taking the time to find out more about your member of Congress, not only so that it helps you kind of have some factoids to go into the meeting with, but really also to better understand where their values and views are coming from so that you can share that common ground with them. And for example, you know, as a non-Texan heading into Texas several years ago, my impression of Texas as a predominantly oil and gas state everywhere, every district, all the time, was really broken open, I guess, in my research for the area around Texas 26 or the Denton district. We have a wonderful representative, Congressman Burgess. He's actually one of only 20 medical doctors in Congress right now. And Denton itself is highly service medical in its kind of jobs and employment. We have 8 out of 10 jobs related to those fields or education and retail. And REMI really shows how all of those sectors will actually deeply benefit from carbon fee and dividend as a policy. So it was really important to kind of highlight that statistic in upcoming meetings and to kind of have a distribution in mind of where the jobs were in the district to make sure to have those conversations with aid and highlight that. What we also found that was really effective was in tracking down the major employers, you know, people like Texas Energy, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Many of those actually companies have statements on their websites about the importance of taking action on climate change. And, you know, making that connection with even some of the medical associations that gave $10,000 annually to Dr. Burgess's campaign, it was really kind of a good connection to be able to highlight that and the importance of taking leadership in Congress in the importance of addressing climate change as well in our meetings. So, you know, we really found that those areas of research were beneficial, especially when kind of some of the zinger questions came up in meetings, you know, with, you know, for example, Congressman Burgess's concern about the loss of jobs overseas or the impact of oil and gas, or, you know, expressing that you know, taxes are always a hard sell in the district. Those things really are something that we would be able to address then with the proper research being put in place. And I also just wanted to highlight another thing, I guess, with becoming a member of Congress's liaison in Texas. And, you know, what was really surprising for me in kind of that discovery process was for one of the meetings, you know, we met with his staff 3 times in district in D.C. Just really we're always kind of trying to build that relationship. And one of the meetings we actually had our executive director, Mark Reynolds, with us for Earth Day, or the Earth Week at least. And as we were waiting in the office, and I think actually Ricky was here too, we were essentially just kind of in the kind of front receiving area, and we were browsing through the library. And if anybody knows the author Lester Brown, who's a very outspoken, you know, climate advocate and kind of mega economy policy wonk, he actually, Congressman Burgess had a copy of his Plan B 2.0 book among the, you know, 5 or 6 books he had on his library shelf. So having kind of those listening ears is always helpful, as we've really developed through the Move Over Misconception wonderful magic that Ellie's been working, but also having listening eyes, I think, is also a very important thing to make those connections, because essentially with that, then we brought that up in the meeting, and that eventually and indirectly led to us meeting personally with Congressman Burgess at the Energy Summit. And I think that his interest in energy planning was a real way that we could have kind of that connection. So I guess just in closing, it's really important to do that kind of research and to really find kind of that kind of closed-door, fostered connection on similar issues and common ground. And really that comes about by doing homework ahead of time. And I'm really looking forward to and enjoying another conference and speaking out on behalf of kind of the joy that we have to work with Congressman Burgess.
Well, thanks, Brett. That's a great story. And, another part of that, not many people know about is Brett actually took the name Billy Brett, so he would sound like a Texan, too, and not a Minnesotan. So that was really good research that he did there. So, all right, thanks, Brett. Brett's going to come back in a few moments and talk to us about laser talks. But let's go ahead right now and just take a quick look at where we are with our webinar roadmap. So tonight, or last week, we talked about Congress, the basis of Congress, what it's like to lobby as a citizen, what our most valuable tools are, and also a lot about building relationships and how you build relationships with members of Congress or their staff. Obviously tonight we talked about what we're going to do is really dive into lobby preparation. Now next week we are going to go through the meeting outline. We'll have an actual meeting demonstration, what a meeting sounds like, and how you can use a lot of the tools that Ellie is teaching us right now about move over misconception, how to listen for values, how to really ask questions, draw out more information. We'll do a little bit more of that at the end of the webinar tonight, but we're going to do a lot of that next week as well during the 301. And then the last webinar we've got set up for you will be the handling difficult situations and advanced lobbying skills. So, every once in a while there is a difficult situation, or maybe there's something that's raised that is a hot button issue, and we're going to demonstrate some ways that you can bring the conversation back on track. But let's jump in right now and talk about the research and the tools that CCL provides the lobby teams. Now, first up, the first thing that we have, or what we'll cover some congressional biographies. We'll talk about meeting notes. We'll talk about the REMI reports regional summaries, and we'll demonstrate where you find those. And also we'll talk about the household impact study and where you find the information that you would need for that to lobby with your member of Congress. And as I mentioned, Brett's going to talk about laser talks. So let's start off. I'll start off with the congressional bios, and we'll turn over to Ellie to start talking about the meeting notes. So the first tool for doing research is the CCL Congressional Biography, or bio for short. And really what it is, it's a combination of publicly available information that we grab from databases and the research that CCL volunteers do. Now, in most cases, the biography is completed by the liaison. And we'll talk about liaisons in just a little bit. But just to complicate things for everyone, we have two versions of the bios. So let me explain. First, we have a short version. Now, this one, again, is made up almost exclusively with objective information, right? So things like the date the person was elected, the names of the staffers, votes on bills that are of interest to CCL. Now, you can get a short version for any member of Congress, the short version of the bio on CCL Community. And let me demonstrate where you find that right now. So I'm switching over to my web browser. And just if you do not know how to get to CCL Community, if you go to our main website, you click on the Take Action button. This is the drop-down menu that appears, and you can see right here in this middle section that says CCL Volunteers is a link for CCL Community. And once you're there, you'll see there's this big blue toolbar across the top. If you click on the Volunteer Resources button, it'll bring you to this page, the Volunteer Resources page. And so there's two ways you can find things. You could either type in bios here in the search bar and click enter, or we're talking about lobbying, so you can see this other menu on the left-hand side. There's a lobbying resources menu. And so if you click on those, I'll show you real quick. If you click on lobbying resources, you'll see all the resources that have to do with lobbying. And you'll see one of the links here is for U.S. congressional bios, which brings us to this page. So again, here's the short version. So if anyone wants a short version for the House bio or a Senate bio, you click on these links and it'll bring you to a Google Drive folder where you can see all the bios are listed, and you can simply download those as PDFs. But going back to this page, if you want the long version of the bio, and let me explain what that is. The long version of the bio has a bunch of subjective information, right? Like it might have information of why we think a member of Congress may or may not support our bill. Now, this is not information we want to get out because a lot of it is opinion. So we limit access to the long bios to the liaisons and the lobby teams who will meet with a member of Congress. So when you go to this bio page, if you click on that, you'll just be taken to a quick form and it'll ask you to enter your email address where it'll check just to make sure you're the liaison. All right, so let me go back to the presentation. All right, so what's on the bio? Bios have biographical information such as where the member of Congress went to school, his background, career, interests, religion, all those types of things. It also has information on their congressional record, like what votes they've taken on relevant bills or what kind of statements they've made, maybe their committee assignments, those types of things, the congressional record. It'll also have district and state level data, including demographics, major industry and employers in the district, and major donors in the district, and also information on what those major employers and major donors have said or statements on climate change. Now, all of this data combined together, along with the concerns expressed by constituents like yourself, are factors in how the member of Congress arrives at his or her decision. So reviewing the bio along with the previous meeting minutes will help you to not only know and anticipate questions, but also develop an understanding of why the member of Congress has taken these positions. And here's what's important too, and who are the people within his or her peer groups that influence the member of Congress. Now, if you're going to DC, you're going to receive the bios you need and the meeting minutes and all that stuff the week before the conference. And Ellie's going to talk to us now about the meeting minutes.
Alrighty, so let's discuss our meeting minutes, previous meeting minutes. On the right-hand side of the screen, you should see a redacted example of some meeting minutes. Previous meeting minutes represent information which was shared in confidence in meetings between congressional offices and CCL volunteers over the years. We consider these minutes to be confidential, and this is some of the most sensitive information that CCL possesses. If this information got out, it could destroy the trust that we've been building with Congress. So for those going to lobby in DC, the liaison and the meeting leader for each meeting will receive the previous meeting minute notes. The liaison may share the previous minutes with you, or they may choose to provide a summary. We do not share our notes with anyone outside of Citizens Climate Lobby. And that said, we trust our volunteers completely to keep this information confidential. Reviewing the notes will help you prepare to address questions, concerns, or misconceptions. For example, if you've been asked to clarify the border adjustment in the last 2 meetings, be prepared for it to come up again. Acknowledge that you understand the border adjustment is a concern that you also take seriously. Or let's say in the last meeting a staffer expressed concern over the cost of collecting the fee and distributing the dividend, then you could prepare to address that in a way that addresses their concern in this meeting. So think of this analogy. We've all had a teacher who would drop hints like, you might see this material again soon, or this section is important, and then somehow that material magically appears on the test, right? So that's what our meeting minutes are for. It's like the member of Congress is telling us what will be on the next test. So be prepared to acknowledge and address the concerns or issues that were raised in the previous meeting.
Thanks, Ellie. Now, a couple of other tools that you can use to prepare for the lobby meeting are the REMI's regional summaries and the district and state level data for the household impact study. Now, for those of you who are new or new-ish to CCL, let me briefly explain these 2 studies before showing you where to find them. Now, the REMI study examined the economic, climate, fiscal, power, and demographic impact of a steadily rising fee on carbon-based fuels with net proceeds. So basically, it looked at our policy, right? And it projected our policy 20 years into the future and said, here's how it's going to impact all these different areas, and these different regions, and all these different factors. On our website, we have regional summaries of the REMI report. for you. So let me show you where to find those. Again, going back to my browser, I'm on the CCL main website. Now on our main website, all the really good, juicy information is at the bottom because it's a lot of stuff and we don't want to overwhelm people when they first come to CCL. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom like I'm doing now, you'll see a link here for Regional Economic Model Report. And that's what we call the REMI report. We abbreviate it. When you click on that, you're brought to this page. It's the REMI report page. And if you scroll down, you'll see some tabs in the middle of the page. Click on regional summaries and you can see here are all the regional summaries of the REMI report. So all the different states, you select your state, you click on the link and it'll automatically download your regional summary of the REMI report. Now the household impact studies we mentioned, that's a little bit different. What the household impact study does is it examines the net financial benefit, or actually it answers this question: how will carbon fee and dividend impact the people in my district, right? And what it does is it examines the net financial impact on various socioeconomic groups. So it's a snapshot in time of the percentage of households that will be benefited in year one. And it's at the state and district level. So the differences between the two reports: REMI projects 20 years in the future and looks at factors of emissions, economy, power generation, and other factors. Whereas the household impact study is a snapshot in time, what happens in year one. REMI looks across consolidates thing into regions, but the household impact study will break it down into state and districts. Now, let me show you what those state and district level graphs look like and where you can find those. So if we go back to CCL Community, we're back on the volunteer resources page, so you will be clicking on the volunteer resources button in the menu. You can either type in household impact study, or on the left-hand side in the menu, there's a menu item for reports, studies, and analysis. You'll see here the household impact study is there. When you click on it, it brings you to the household impact study page. And under the resources header, number 4 here says study results per district and by state. So if you click on the district, again, it'll take you to a Google folder, Google Drive folder, and you can see here all the different results for every state. And so once you click on one of those, they're automatically going to download, and you'll have the graphs and the charts that you need to have a conversation with your member of Congress about exactly how this policy will impact their community. So getting back to the presentation, the one thing that, the big takeaway from last week's lesson, what Danny Richter told us, is that data on how a policy will impact a member's district or state is the most influential tool we have at our disposal. And that's what these two studies represent.
Perfect. So I think it also makes sense to transition to one last important tool that we have in our quiver of arrows before jumping into some Q&A here. So let's just briefly talk and cover laser talks and just kind of highlight some of the ways not only to use them, but also where to find them and which ones perhaps are most important to prepare for your district. So, reading CCL's laser talks is truly a great way to get an in-depth but also a really concise education about various angles on the impacts of carbon fee and dividend. And the great thing about them is that laser talks aren't actually meant to be memorized word for word. You don't have to, rehearse them over and over like you might have had to in an English Shakespearean class in high school. They're just really meant to be internalized so that you can put your own words to them and express them with your own kind of values and perspective. So what do we mean when we actually say, though, that they're meant to be internalized? And I think kind of in saying that, another way of kind of framing it would be that you are then actually better able to listen closely as you're expressing kind of these responses to what others are saying without actually having to think ahead and worry about, okay, well, how am I going to address that? How I respond to this topic? Because you'll already be so well practiced and prepared that it will just roll off the tongue, and a lot more of your active memory can be utilized in those meetings for active listening and really kind of engaging in what are the values behind the words of whoever you might be interacting with at the meeting, the aide, the legislative director, the member of Congress himself. So the great thing is we actually have over 50 laser talks on CCL's website. The other great thing is we actually don't expect you to have to review all of them before the upcoming conference. So one great way that you can kind of help target which topics to actually review for your specific district would be to really look at those previous meeting minute notes and know which ones that you might be best prepared to practice and address it if and when they come up for your meeting. So Ricky's put on kind of the slides a great distribution of kind of some of the most common topics, the usual suspects, if you will. The top three really all around in about 1/5 of the meetings, asking about, what happens to dividend or EPA's role or border adjustments. But then there's also a lot of discussions around jobs, taxes, even kind of the energy costs to consumers and, the associated impacts on households with those. So all of those are kind of just put out there right now so that you can see there's a lot of different angles that obviously, members of staff or Congress can take with carbon fee and dividend. And it's going to be important for you just to feel both equally this balance between being well-versed on these topics, but aware that you can't be an expert on everything, so to really laser in on the laser talks that are most relevant and important to your district.
Great, thanks, Brett. And another thing to note real quick before we take a question is that actually in your action sheet this month will be a link to the all the laser talks associated that you really need to study up on or to sort of internalize before going to DC. So you don't have to go to the website and try to figure out which ones we think you should look at. It'll actually be a link to a document you can download and just have them all instead of having to gather them up yourself. So we've covered right now the research portion, and we heard Brett's take on why researching and being prepared is vital to our success. So let's stop here and take a couple of questions on the tools we have at our disposals before we turn to the roles of a lobby meeting. Now, as a reminder, you can still submit your questions through the question pane in the control panel or by raising your hand, and then we'll just unmute your line at that point. And I know Brett's got to drop off because he's got a graduation event happening tonight. So Brett, thanks for your participation, and Ellie and I will take it from here. We appreciate you being with us.
Thank you very much, Ricky, and have a wonderful training, everyone.
Thanks, Brett. All right, so let's start, Ellie, let's start with a couple of questions. Our first question tonight looks like it's coming from, how can we find, James asked, how can we find impacts more than 1 year into the future? I think, James, maybe as far as for households right now, we don't have that type of modeling to say exactly what percentage of household it benefits or has a minor loss, which is what the household impact study shows. We do have, like I said, the REMI report projects 20 years in the future on emission scenarios, power generation, lives saved from less pollution in the air, all those things. So that is more like of a future look. Ellie, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I do. Remember that individuals and families are going to be making changes, and so it is possible to look at year one because people won't have made that very many changes in the first year, but year 2, year 5, year 15, we all will have made some changes, and each family will be making their own set of changes, so I think it's pretty impossible to project how it would impact a particular family because we don't know what changes they'll be making as a result of the carbon fee and dividend. So yes, the REMI is your best look for, looking at 10, 20, 15 years out.
Yeah, that's a great point. Lois also asked, and let me just see real quick if there's any hands up as well, and then I'll let you. Yeah, so there's a hand up. Craig will be coming to you right after this question, so be prepared. The other question we have from Lois, Ellie, the scheduler would like the energy aid to have a copy of the household impact study ahead of our lobby meeting. Doesn't it need interpretation? Ellie, do you want to address that?
I think it's okay. You can be respectful of their requests, and if you want to you could say, please look at this particular section or this particular page or this particular item. We'll be looking forward to talking with you about those. We think it's very relevant to how we might interpret this for our district. So feel free to, if they've asked for that, it's fine to give it to them, and you could give a little. You also could then say to them, here it is. We'd be interested in any questions that come up so we could be prepared to answer those. So as you're reviewing this in advance, please email us with questions so we can come with the answers you need in that meeting that we're going to have with you in DC.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Lois, the best meetings I've ever had are ones in which we have sent the information ahead of time so the person is prepared, and it is really such a robust discussion at that point. You can get past a lot of the initial explanations that you need to do if they've done their research ahead of time, and I really like it when they're prepared and they're ready with and know exactly what we're going to talk about. It really does make, I think, for a better meeting. And I think the household impact study stands on its own, especially with this new update to it that shows the concept of a minor loss and how many households actually benefit or have just a slight loss. I think it's great news. So yeah, I wouldn't shy away from it at all. Craig Preston, I'm going to unmute your line if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Ricky. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you fine.
Great. Thank you for doing this Lobbying 201. One of the components we start our meetings with is a thank you. And do you have some suggestions on how we would find things to thank the member for? I'm thinking we could sign up for their newsletter. We could search the newspaper where their name's been listed. What do you suggest of ways to find things to authentically? And also, is it something that happened recently, or is it okay if it's a year ago, or how do we come up with the thank you?
That's a great question, Craig. Thanks for the question. And we are going to talk about the appreciation and who does the appreciation in a few moments. But Ellie, do you want to just chime in with how you think what you think is the best way for us to gather that kind of information?
Yeah, I think Craig had some good suggestions there. Looking online and looking on the members' website, they would be sharing on their things that they feel proud about. You can look for current things that they've done, and you can look for things that they've done in other phases of their life. Maybe they work at the state government level or locally, and there might be something that they did in those areas. And yep, it's always our practice to start out with a message of appreciation. You're right about that, Craig, and looking for that in advance is a really smart idea. So thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, and I would just say, yeah, thanks, Craig. I think the only thing I would add that is I think I agree with what Ellie's saying is it's not really, I think current is better, but more than anything, it needs to be genuine. It needs to be something that you truly appreciate the person for, because it does show if you've got some feeling behind it, they can tell that you're more than just saying it, that you actually feel it. So just make sure it's something that you genuinely care or appreciative for. So let's go ahead. It's about 7:30 right now. We'll have time for other questions at the end. Let's go ahead and switch gears now and begin discussing the various roles one could assume on a lobby team.
Yeah, so as you get closer to your meeting, you'll want to begin to think about the roles. And so here you see a list of some of the roles volunteers can assume in a lobby meeting. We're going to review each one of these in more detail in this section, but there's a couple of things to keep in mind with these roles. The roles are merely suggestions. Based on your relationship with the people or the person with whom you're meeting, some of these roles may not apply, so be flexible. The roles are simply to make sure we don't forget something. A volunteer may be asked to fill one or more of these roles in a meeting. So, for example, you may have 1 to 4 teammates in a typical meeting, but there are more than 4 roles. So people will likely be assuming more than one role. And the last thing to point out is that everyone should feel comfortable contributing during the discussion part of your meeting, regardless of what role they have taken on. So I want to begin to talk about our liaisons, because we're going to be referring to them in this section. A liaison is a CCL volunteer who has offered to be the face of Citizens Climate Lobby in a particular congressional office. So the liaison builds a personal relationship with that office. They maintain regular contact. They act as a source of information for that office. They provide updates on Citizens Climate Lobby progress to that office. Now, as often as possible, the liaison will also be the meeting leader. as he or she has primary responsibility for that relationship and the subsequent meeting. However, sometimes the leader will be an experienced volunteer who is not a constituent, or a constituent who is not the liaison. Now, one of the most important things the leader will do is assign goals. So let's talk about the meeting leader. The leader is there to manage, facilitate the meeting, not dominate the meeting. I like the analogy of a conductor. So, of course, the conductor does not play the trumpet and the clarinet and the violin and bang on the drums. The conductor ensures that the clarinets all come in at the right time and the drums roll there in the back when their time is right, and is looking everyone in the eye and make sure that people have the right music and have gotten trained and done their practicing. So the conductor there pulls the whole piece together, and the orchestra functions in a way that it couldn't if the conductor wasn't there. So the leader empowers everyone to share and participate, paying particular attention to the constituents in that meeting. The leader may choose to be in charge of handling the transitions between the different parts of the meeting. They will help keep the conversation on track and help wrap up things. The leader will help the team settle on the appropriate supporting ask for the meeting and make sure that everyone is on the same page with that ask.
Now, the next role, Ellie, we have is the asker. Well, sounds pretty simple, right? This is the person who can clearly and confidently state our one ask, and that is to introduce or support legislation that puts a fee on carbon and returns the net proceeds back to American households. Now, the person in this role should be able to demonstrate active listening and be able to respond and have a pretty good grasp of carbon fee and dividend. Here's an example of what that might sound like. Representative Smith, our big goal is to get effective national legislation passed. And as you know, we would like to introduce or support legislation that puts a fee on carbon and returns the net proceeds back to American households. Is that something you can support? Now, if Congressman Smith says yes, you say that's terrific. Let's talk about the next steps, and then you move on to asking them to do something you figured out before the meeting, the supporting ask. If they say no, a good question is, can you please tell us more about what you would need to do, or what would you need to change to be able to support something like this? Or could you tell us more about what you object to in our proposal? So you want to ask some more questions. No never means no. It just means I need more information. And so we need to pull more information out of them at that point. But also, if they're not ready to fully support carbon fee and dividend at that moment, then we'll have a supporting ask ready for the office. And we'll cover in detail the supporting ask in the Lobbying 301 lesson.
All right. So the note taker is an extremely important role. If possible, the meeting leader will put an experienced lobbyist in this role. An experienced lobbyist is better able to pick up on the subtleties in the conversation and more quickly identify the important themes in the room. Great notes help us both locally and nationally. So locally, as we heard from Brett's story, the notes keep a running record of where a member of Congress stands and on how a member of Congress position has evolved over time. It helps inform us on future meetings that we're going to be planning. Notes ensure that we do good follow-up. Whatever we promise to do, we do that because we've got them in the notes. The notes also enable us to act on any action items we might otherwise forget, and it passes on the knowledge when a group or a liaison changes its leadership. Now, nationally, our notes help give us a sense for the national picture, and it helps us identify trends. Our legislative director, Dr. Daniel Richter, reads through every single note from the conference, and he pulls those trends out. So notes are so important for that effort as well.
And if you want to try to trip Danny up, just put a note to him in the notes to see if he responds. I've done that before. It's pretty funny. All right. So what are the things a good note taker will capture during the course of the meeting? So some of the things you want to capture, obviously the supporting ask, because this is probably something that the member of Congress or staffer agreed to doing. So we need to know what it is, and it needs to be recorded so we can follow up. We'll make sure we record the concerns, questions, or recommendations the staffer or member of Congress has about our policy, points of interest about our strategy, things that they found interesting. But here's also what I think is probably some of the most important information you want to capture is what was the tone of the meeting? It's hard to read that in notes. So explicitly tell us, what was the tone of the meeting? Were they engaged? Were they interested? Were they hostile? Did they want to be anywhere but in that meeting with us at that point in time? What was their body language? And make sure you discuss that with others. We'll talk about the debrief session here in just a moment, but make sure that everyone's impressions match. And then the final couple things you want to do is make sure that the notes contain all the follow-up items, not only for us, but for the member of Congress. And if you want to get more information about taking great notes, we actually have a whole lesson and a whole page on community with tips and tricks for taking great notes. So when you go to that search bar, you can just type in taking notes on community, and it'll take you to that page.
All right. So you've had your meeting in the office. You are excited and energized. Your adrenaline's running. The group steps out of the meeting after you've shaken hands with the folks you're meeting with and thanked them. I want you to scoot down the hall away from the doorway and then hold a debrief meeting. And during that debriefing, the note taker should review what they captured and share that with the rest of the team. I want you to do this while the meeting is fresh in everyone's mind. So again, this usually takes place in the hallway. Maybe you all want to scoot down and grab something to eat in the cafeteria. That's fine too, but the sooner you do the debriefing, the better. You also want to confirm who is going to do what follow-up. Everyone should send a thank you note after a meeting, so someone might have a thank you note that folks can fill out and drop off there at the meeting. Someone is going to file the meeting report. There might be information the office asks for, and you need to provide that information. Who is going to provide that information? How? Email, delivering it, whatever. And here's a little tip with the thank you card. If someone bring thank you cards to the conference, and you can offer to use that thank you card. Everyone can sign it right there in the hallway, put it in the envelope, and someone marches right back in and hand delivers that to the receptionist so that thank you card doesn't have to go through the mail and reaches that staffer immediately.
Yeah, it makes a big impression. The next role that we have really is the timekeeper. Now, at the beginning of the meeting, this person will ask, how much time during the introductions. They'll say, how much time do we have for this meeting? It's in our outline. But they'll also be the person who signals the team when about like 5 minutes are left in the meeting, right? Because we got some things we want to do at the end. What's important to keep in mind here as well, and the timekeeper and the leader can talk about this ahead of time, but we've all been in situations where we've been in a meeting that we just wanted to end, right? And you're probably concerned at times that, wow, how do I get out of this meeting and do it in a gracious way? So read the body language of the staffer. Know when they are done. If they begin checking the time or closing their notebook, that means they are really ready for the meeting to end, and it's time for us to wrap up. And it doesn't mean that even with there's a couple minutes left that we try to cram in every point we didn't get to say yet. If they're clearly ready for that meeting to end, then let's just end it gracefully and do it with respect. We should never rush ourselves, but begin to look for ways to conclude a meeting before they are ready. It's a whole psychological thing of leaving them wanting for more. We're going to have several meetings with them or several meetings that member of Congress. So leaving them wanting for more really gives them a reason to have us back. So that's the role of the timekeeper. You probably should, talk with the leader ahead of time to see, okay, if we start seeing that body language, how do we want to wrap things up?
Awesome. So the appreciator is the next role, and it is such an important one. This is the person who is going to express gratitude and appreciation for something the member of Congress has done, either recently or in the distant past. ideally, this is a constituent, so a voter in the district. You, like we brought up, like Craig brought up, you want to do the research for the appreciation well in advance of your meeting, and you want to find something you can genuinely appreciate about them. Now, starting the meeting with a message of appreciation sets a positive tone for the meeting. It disarms people who might be thinking, I know exactly what these folks are going to say to me. And the other thing it does is it allows you to take the chip off of your shoulder. So we all have things that other people have done that have disappointed us. And certainly our member of Congress, he's got quite a list of things they've done that we don't like. And if we go in thinking about that list, how can we ask them then to be our climate hero when we just know all of the things they've done wrong? So we need to set the list aside, and we need to focus on what they've done right and thank them for that, because we want them to be able to be our climate hero. I want to tell one quick story. We had some volunteers from one of our states in the middle of the country. They knew exactly what they were going to thank their member of Congress for. They had a face-to-face meeting set with that member of Congress. They would be actually meeting with the member of Congress, not staff members. Well, they got there, and the member of Congress was unable to be in the meeting, and so they met with staffers, and they were cheerful about that. We go with the flow in Citizens Climate Lobby. They sat down. It was one of those kind of funny office spaces where you have the low walls, and behind the walls are the other cubbies and desks and what. So they were in the sort of front area, crowded around a little table. And they started off the meeting, and they said, we want to thank our congressman. Please let him know that we are very grateful for the work he's done in protecting the wetlands in our district. And they heard this voice from on the other side of those dividers. I worked hard on that. I'm so glad that you are grateful for my work. Out popped the member of Congress. So look, they're people too, and he was actually maybe scared of meeting with us because he thought we were going to read him the riot act of all the things he'd done wrong. And so when we came in and thanked him for something specific that he felt good about, it shifted the tone of the meeting. It literally brought him out of his shell.
Awesome. I love
Ricky.
Yeah. I love that story. That's a great story. And so it brings us to our last role, actually our second to last role. We're going to talk about is the person that moves the relationship forward, really the person who does the follow-up. And, there's this, the question we've all heard before, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, did it make a sound? So, what if a meeting happens in D.C. and no one follows up on it? Should we expect anything to happen? Probably not, right? We don't, like you said, members of Congress aren't there to lead. They're there to respond to political will. So in general now, it's best that if the follow-up is done by the person who is best situated to carry the relationship forward, which is usually the liaison. However, that might be another constituent, or it might be, someone who just happened to click in the meeting with the member of Congress or the aide. That happens. So the other thing that the follow-up person wants to do is make sure they drop off the thank you card, as Ellie mentioned, and do that in the same day. It helps sometimes to maybe include a local photo of your district. The follow-up person needs to identify the things in the notes that they agreed to do for us and that we agreed to do for them. And here's the key. Just like with setting schedules, the person doing the follow-up needs to be politely persistent if they don't respond. We'll talk about in a minute about how completely overwhelmed these offices are. So they will appreciate polite persistence and being reminded of doing something. So just keep that in mind as you're interacting with the members of Congress. And we'll talk about how overwhelmed they are in just a second.
So the final role we want to talk about is the leaver. This is the person who leaves our one-page ask behind. And it is pretty easy to forget to do this. That's why we have one person dedicated to remembering this. Now, you might bring other materials to the meeting, but we don't want you to offer to leave them behind. As we discussed in Lobby 101, congressional staffers are extremely busy, so we respect that, and we try not to overwhelm them with a bunch of handouts. So congressional offices, here's a bit of information for you, have received anywhere from a 200 to a 1,000% increase in constituent communications in the past decade alone. What makes things worse is that by law, members of the House have been limited to 18 staffers since the 1970s. Most of the staffers are millennials, so they much prefer an electronic document to a printed copy. If they don't ask for a specific resource, they likely won't read it if you give it to them. If they do ask for one, 9 times out of 10 they'll want it as an electronic document. So our practice is to leave the one-page primary ask behind only to avoid overwhelming them. That said, you might have other resources we bring to the meeting, like a media packet or the booklet of faith statements and other documents like that. It's okay, bring those. Have hard copies of these or other resources on hand. Show them to the staffers. They might ask you, can I have those? If they do, you're welcome to give them. Otherwise, you've just had a chance to do a little show and tell, and that's perfectly fine.
All right. So we just covered, again, a lot of material about meeting roles. Let me just check the time here and see how much time we've got. We got just a few moments. Why don't we take a couple of questions, Ellie, and then we'll talk about the importance of practice, and we'll do our demonstration of communication skills for tonight. So let me just read off a couple of questions we've got. Carol asked, Ricky, I missed the last thing you said about don't worry, we'll have it in your packet. What I think I was referring to, Carol, is the laser talks that are the most relevant laser talks for the conference. And that's actually in the action sheet. There'll be a link to it in the action sheet that everyone should get. It's on our website, action sheets. It's on CCL Community. Everyone has access to those. So you can definitely go ahead and download the action sheet now and find those. Ellie, this is a question here from you from Ellen. She asked, can you talk about how the roles in the meeting are established?
So the leader, the meeting leader, it's their job to figure out who's going to play which role. You will be able to have talk with your meeting leader well in advance. We're going to get that information out, who's going to be in what meeting well in advance of the conference and lobby day. So you might schedule a phone call, or your meeting leader might schedule a phone call, or you all might find time during the meal breaks at the conference on Sunday and Monday to meet as a team. And the meeting leader will find out a little bit about everyone and make the best decision they can make about who should do which role. And you can let them know, I'd like to do this role. I looked up information about my member of Congress. I know exactly what I want to appreciate her for. And so feel free to let your meeting leader know so that they can make a good decision about that.
Great. All right. So we got about 10 minutes. So why don't we go ahead and finish up, and then we'll, round out the hour with questions. So let's go ahead and begin talking about the importance of practice.
All righty. So we say all the time that we are not expecting you to be a professional lobbyist. However, we do have a reputation as being one of the most well-prepared citizens groups on Capitol Hill. So practicing and having a clear meeting plan demonstrates that you respect their time. Practice the laser talks, not to memorize them, but as we said, so you can feel confident and capable. This allows you to be fully present in the meeting. A laser talk is not designed to turn you into a lecturer. We're not lecturing. We're building a relationship. If you can carve out a little time for practice with each other before or during a DC conference, you will go into your meeting with more confidence. Not just more confidence in your own abilities, but with more confidence and fluidity among your teammates. Practicing ahead of time allows you to learn which issues your teammates are well versed in, so that you may defer to them when appropriate. When the members of Congress and staffers see you working smoothly together, they will come away even more impressed by our capacity to make things happen. So when will we have time to practice with our team? We plan to have your schedules, bios, and meeting plans to those who are going to DC out the week before the conference. If you can, we encourage the lobby teams to do some advanced work together. Maybe that's an email conversation that happens, or y'all get together on a conference call before coming to DC. Like I said, at the conference, there are meal times, and it's during those times you could get together with your lobby team. Your meeting leader will be in contact to schedule those practice sessions. You can practice as a team. You can also practice your own particular part in front of the mirror. Mark is always encouraging us to do mirror work, and you'd be surprised how helpful it is to talk out loud to yourself. So let me leave you with this. Plans must always be flexible. So follow your team lead in the meeting and be ready to think on your feet. Each meeting is one step in a process of winning allies. And what isn't accomplished in one meeting can be worked on another day, as long as you leave them with a positive feeling about who we are.
Awesome. And I can't emphasize that part about developing trust in your teammates and how important that is. So many of us are worried about how we're going to do in a meeting, and I think after your first meeting, you're going to realize that you've got a really good team around you, and it's just going to put you at ease. So, practicing with that team beforehand will probably put you at ease even before you go into the meeting. So now with each lobby training webinar before DC this year, we're also going to include a demonstration of some advanced listening skills and communication skills. Now, as Ellie mentioned, we practice our laser talks to internalize facts and messaging, but we also need to continually practice asking questions, identifying values, and showing curiosity and trying to find common ground in the views of the people we're meeting with. Now, the content or the acting ability here is not the important part of this demonstration. Rather, what's important here is the process that Ellie, who's going to play the CCL volunteer in this demonstration, uses to draw out more information from the person she's meeting with, which is going to be me. I'll play the member of Congress. So we're often asking people, and how would you respond to this, and how would you respond to that? What we would offer is that a lot of times what you want to respond with is another question to get more information out of them. And we're going to demonstrate that. So I'm going to play the member of Congress. Ellie is a volunteer. And the situation here is that Ellie, the volunteer, is going through and describing the carbon fee to me.
So we propose a fee on fossil fuels starting low at $15 a ton and steadily increasing every year.
Ellie, look, I get that we need to do something. However, I'll tell you, Ellie, I'm worried about China and India. And I mean, if we're the only ones who do this, it's going to kill our economy.
It sounds like supporting American businesses is important to you.
Well, of course. I mean, we have to have a strong business community in the U.S. if we want a healthy economy. China is putting lots of people that are willing to work for really low wages, and that's already putting our manufacturing at a disadvantage. And if we increase energy costs, then more businesses are just going to move overseas.
So keeping businesses here is important to me as well. So thanks for mentioning that. Do you have any thoughts on how the U.S. might get China and India to come along?
Well, we're a country. We can't regulate China. We can't regulate the world, and these subsidies, they don't cross borders either. No.
Well, I've been scratching my head on that question too, Ricky. It seems like through regulations, we're already raising the cost of energy here in the U.S.
Well, that's true. We would love to find something that levels the playing field for U.S. businesses.
We really appreciate the conversation about a level playing field for all nations, because it's something we put a lot of thought into as well. Would you like to hear about what we've learned?
Sure. All right, so that's the end of our demonstration. Please no comments on our acting ability. We're not up for any awards, that's for sure. But so hopefully you picked up on how Ellie asked questions there to get more information out of me. I mean, she did so to determine what was the underlying value behind that China comment that I made. Then she agreed with that value, and she sought some common ground with me. She asked a couple additional questions, and then what was very important, she asked for permission to proceed. You want to hear what we've learned? And at that point, I was ready to hear. Think about how different that conversation feels if immediately following my China comment, Ellie were to launch into the data about how the world is moving forward without us, it would have felt as if she was telling me I was wrong. And that's not a good thing to do for a relationship. Instead, she steered the conversation towards finding common ground. Then she asked for permission to proceed to tell him what she has learned. And it really is at that point that I'm prepared to hear more about what she has to say. So that's, more and more. Ellie, you can, if you would like to, we got just a couple of minutes left, talk a little bit more about, listening for values and finding common ground and what you were able to pull out of that demonstration.
Well, it's so funny. I remember this just reminds me of a meeting that I was in. I think it was my second conference, so maybe it was 2012. And we were meeting with a member of Congress from one of the Wild West states, or his staffer. And here we were talking about carbon fee and dividend and reducing carbon pollution so we can solve the climate crisis. And the staffer wanted to tell us about his great idea, which was to have people drive at different hours of the day. So if we had work shifts that were slightly different, then we would have people on the highway surrounding their big city there. So that we wouldn't have congestion and all the pollution happening at once. And we kept on going back, no, it's about the climate change. And here was this guy trying to solve our problem. He didn't have the right solution, but he was so sincere. And that was a moment that really touched me and made me began my thinking about, are we really in tune with what the member of Congress or their staffer is trying to bring to the table? And if we are not, like we weren't in that meeting, we kept pushing back. That's not the answer. That's not the answer. What if we had said, oh, that's an amazing, delicious, fabulous solution to the problem of congestion. You are a great thinker. Thank you so much for thinking about how to make congestion, how to ease congestion in our capital city. Thank you for that thought. Hey, that would have validated him. So that was, for me, the beginning of my thinking about, what are these people bringing to the table that we don't catch because we're so driven to give our laser talks or driven to get them to agree with us. Maybe we would do better to receive a little bit, receive their thinking, receive their generosity, understand their questions, validate them. So that just popped in my mind as we were doing that there, Ricky.
No, that's awesome. That's I couldn't have said that better. I don't think anyone could say that better. So that was awesome. I appreciate that. We have one question from Dara, Ellie, and this one's right up your alley as well. Because I'm attending these webinars before the conference, will I still want to attend the live training session for newbies that will be offered Sunday morning at the conference? And I think that's the group start in the...
Yes, you will, because I'm leading it, my friend. That is Climate Advocate Training Group Start Workshop. It is a delicious workshop. Mark and I will be co-leading it. It couldn't be any more delicious. And so, yes, of course, the wonderful thing about that is we cover our core values. It really lets you soak up our core values. We do a practice meeting with a member of Congress. We cover a little bit on how to write a letter to the editor. And even people who have taken that before, it is a fabulous thing to take again. And I just think it would give you some more foundational experience with Citizens Climate Lobby. Definitely, we want you in that meeting for sure.
Awesome. A couple other quick questions or some comments. George and Amy both responding to Craig's question regarding how do you find appreciations. They suggest setting up a Google alert for your member of Congress. And Amy also says to check the member site's press release tab. There are many things on that tab or that part of their website that they would be proud of. Peter asked, how will I know... What's up? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Their Facebook page, Ricky. Oh. They often share little nuggets there.
Great, good question. I will take a couple more. How will I know with which members of Congress and or senators I will meet? Peter, about a week before the conference, you'll be receiving a schedule, so just be on the lookout for that. He wants to know, who my group leader will be for each meeting. It'll be listed on that schedule, so it'll show you their name, and it'll actually, I believe it gives you their phone number. Isn't that right, Ellie? Correct? Yep.
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 Yep, that's right.
And what will my role be in the meeting? That'll be the discussion you have with the leader of the meeting, and they'll assign you a role. And they'll ask you about it. And Nadine asked, and this is a great question. Our chapter has been working hard collecting constituent comment forms for a member of Congress. Our goal is to bring several hundred to the June meeting for a member of Congress. Is that okay? Yes, absolutely, and highly encouraged. It's a good
Ricky,
way.
can I add something there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would encourage you to read through them and pick 2 or 3 that are just incredibly delicious and put those on the top of the pile. And you can say, Congressman or staffer or Congresswoman, here are 272 letters from constituents in our district expressing desire that you lead on climate solutions. I'm going to read you this one, and you read a little nugget from him. From it. He may or may not, or she may or may not read any of those. And if you pulled out one and read the most delicious one, it will help them appreciate the messages that are in all of those letters, whether they read them or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great point to give them to the member of Congress right when you're sort of doing we'll go through the meeting outline next week. And when you're telling them what our purpose is, and at the very beginning of the meeting, our purpose is to create political will for a livable world. Here's what we're doing for you in your district. And that's when you tell them, you show them that you're on their side. You want them to be able to do something. And so what you're doing out there is you're trying to create the political space for them in the district. Here are those letters, and like Ellie said, pull out the best one. That's a fantastic point. Well, we're going to wrap up tonight. It is 8 o'clock. I do want to thank Brett and Ellie for being with us tonight. Thanks, Ellie. You have so much great, just your insight and your ability to make us think about different ways to pull information out of people and to look at things differently. It's invaluable. So I appreciate you being with us tonight. Next week, we have our Lobbying 301. I really think that's if you want to hear what an entire meeting with a member of Congress sounds like, and with some commentary and some different points, make sure that you're tuned in next week. But that's it for tonight. We appreciate everyone being here, and you should receive a recording of this webinar within the next 24 hours. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.